I've been playing Combat Mission Shock Force 2, which is sort of the topic of today's episode, so I won't really delve into that. But I've still been playing a fair bit of Grand Tactician, the Civil War, still War in the Pacific. I think, I don't have a lot to really talk about the games that I'm playing lately, other than the fact that Grand Tactician still has a lot of bugs, but I think they are starting to make some progress on some of that. The tactical battles are pretty interesting. They added the Wilderness lately, which is a fun little battle. I think they could probably do a better job of extending Fog of War. It seems too easy in heavily wooded terrain to see the enemy so well out of engagement range that it's really just too easy to flank the enemy all the time. And I think the AI is doing a better job of reacting to flanking maneuvers. But I guess I would still expect a little bit more. Fog of War would make things more interesting, where you would collide with enemy units, perhaps unintentionally, or you wouldn't discover them till you were too close to really effectively maneuver without exposing your flank. That would feel more real for some of those battles that are in heavily wooded terrain.
I wonder if there'd be an option even. I don't think so, because I don't know if this makes even sense to add, but I understand what you're saying, and I think I agree, although I kind of like it, almost like for a difficulty setting, to be able to play on what one may call like an easier difficulty, where you have slightly increased spotting. I completely agree with you, by the way, that you can scout a little bit further than you should be able to.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a matter of scouting. Like, if they made it so that my cavalry had, better line of sight, then fine, or whatever. And maybe they do. I haven't looked super close at it. But I should be required to be making those tactical decisions to scout, as opposed to just move the entire line of infantry through, wooded terrain, and we'll pick them up and then be just able to completely move around their flank easily.
I also have another issue with, since you mentioned this and it just popped up in my head, is, so I ran into, this is not a bug. I know this is part of the game. So I took the town of Gettysburg, and I controlled everything from Culp's Hill to Seminary Ridge. And the Union were sending message riders, couriers from the south to the cavalry that was north, either Devon's or Gamble's cavalry. And they went right through one of my, brigades. And I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, wouldn't that guy get caught? Like, if he's running and he's in a Union uniform, I highly doubt the Confederates would be like, oh, that's a courier. No, he can go right through. He can go right through. It just didn't make sense. And I'm hoping, if you control the road or whatever, if the courier has to come through you, that they get captured, something like that, because that would happen in real life, right?
That's what Scourge of War does. But that's kind of funny too, because then somehow, even though the courier was killed, the originator knows, even if they're a mile away, he has died, send another. And so you can get into these scenarios where the courier keeps riding into the enemy lines and keeps getting shot, and you've got 40 couriers dead on the ground.
Yeah, that happens, Sean, and I don't know if it'll always happen. Basically, that courier, it should be a real entity, but right now it's just an abstraction, just indicating how long it'll take for the orders to get there. But I guess they're going to have to do pathfinding, which maybe they don't want to do. Pathfinding is always a difficult thing to get the courier to route around enemy lines, or they'll have to implement something like Scourge of War, where your courier can actually be captured.
Yeah, I think wrapping around would be better. So this way you don't have to deal with, like Matt said, 40 couriers dead. If they go wrap around, it would increase the delay for the order to get there. I think that would be a nice compromise.
They do that a little bit. They follow roads, so there's a little bit of a wrapping effect. But you're right. If the enemy's along that road line, then it's kind of silly.
Yeah. I just, I love the game. I've been playing it quite a bit. But I don't know. I wanted to ask you guys, since we had before early access, we had the preview copies, right? I've noticed between the preview copies and when early access came out, I feel like there are more bugs.
I don't know if there are more bugs. There might be different bugs.
Yeah, I don't know if I noticed the same thing.
I just, I had weird things that popped up. A good example is a scenario of Gettysburg, right? So I moved Hill's Corps forward, and Heat's Corps brigade division was out in front. For some reason, the cavalry move north from the ridge that they were supposed to occupy. I forgot the name of the ridge, but so they moved north. So I was able to just take that hill that normally was supposed to be a battle, and I had Heat just keep going. And I took the town. I went and took the heights beyond the town, and I just had like one brigade kind of deal with Devon's and Gamble's cavalry. And then, noon came, 3 o'clock came, 5 o'clock came, and I'm like, okay, I know the first corps was supposed to show up somewhere before noon. And I thought like there was a bug in the game, like maybe they didn't show up, but they did show up. They were all the way south of town. They were way further down than Big Round Top. And every time I approached them, I didn't even have to fire at them. As I approached them, all their units routed. It was really weird. Did you guys ever run into anything like that?
No, I don't think so. But I think that's going to be natural. I think anytime you're crushing bugs, it's very common that you're going to create other bugs as you fix the initial, because it's not so much like a bug in the code in a lot of these cases. Like a lot of the stuff that I think they're working on fixing are actual are more of changing the way the game works, less actual technical. Like there are technical bugs, but one example is people were complaining that troops are retreating through their own lines. Like if they're retreating, they wouldn't move through the lines that the guy's shooting at them. And so obviously, they quote unquote fixed that bug, but what that really probably looks like is changing the logic for how troops retreat. And if they're changing the logic, that's introducing more complexity or changing the complexity that already exists so that you could then create a new bug in something you hadn't even considered. So I think you're going to see a fair bit of that as they work to refine the game.
Do you guys notice, I wanted to ask you guys, did you ever notice, I've never seen units surrender, I don't believe. So for example, if I surround an enemy unit, I don't think I've ever seen them surrender. I think they rout.
They're supposed to at some point, but I don't know if that's in the game yet. It is a mechanic where I've had an army surrender. Lee surrendered to me after halfway through the second day of the Battle of the Wilderness. So
oh wow,
the whole army surrendered though, not just some units.